Hold it with your left hand, go just up, bring your right hand on and do the back motion. And what happened where I put my hands like that, if I just take that to the top of my swing, now I have that flat left wrist, and now I have everything else I want, good club face angle, etc. And that's from that right wrist bending back. So the trail wrist getting bent back is the piece that's gonna flatten your left wrist. The key or the secret is being able to fully hinge your wrist up on the way back while having the lead wrist flat. That's the secret. And in order to do that, you have to get this trail wrist extension. Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about the hanger training aid. I absolutely love this. I firmly believe that this is good for every single golfer. This hanger here creates and controls what I think is the most important part of the swing, which is the wrist angle. It snaps right on. It takes me probably 30 seconds to put on. I can put it right in my golf bag, and best of all is you can hit balls with it. You can actually hit balls with it. So I love this hanger training aids. Look at when I do that well, how that sits on my forearm. Now watch when I cut my wrist, how that comes off. Immediate feedback for where my wrist angle is at. No one that can have too flat of a left wrist. One of the few things that all good ball strikers have, we're trying to have. Flat left wrist, right? Super easy to use, incredible immediate feedback with the coupon code GogornoGolf.com. You're gonna absolutely love it. We'll put all the details down in the description down below. All right guys, Eric here at the Bethlehem Golf Club. In today's video, we're gonna talk about how the wrists really work in the golf swing. If you're someone who struggles with getting the wrist angles correct, struggles with consistency, has any questions on that, this video is gonna really help you. And I wanna share an idea and concept that I did with a recent lesson of mine, a gentleman named Carl that came in, and we talked about how the wrists were hinging. This really helped him, had a light bulb moment. I hope that it'll help you as well. Here's the general concept and idea of how the wrists work. And we're gonna talk throughout the video in terms of detail, timing, amounts, drills you can do, etc. But the basic idea Carl and I talked about was this. In the swing, the wrist should hinge some amount up towards me, thumb towards me, and they should hinge some amount back. We'll call that away from the target, okay? So the wrists go up and down, and they go back and forth. Up, down, back, forth. Now, especially during the backswing and early downswing part, the pieces we need to focus on is how to hinge up and back, up and back. Now, Carl was having an issue. He said, Eric, when I come in and I make a backswing, I feel like I'm hinging the wrist up, okay? But when I do that, I get a really big cup in my left wrist. If we can sort of punch in on my lead wrist here, there's a big angle here in my left wrist, a cup. And when I do that, he said, then my club face gets open. So he said, Eric, I know I'm supposed to hinge during the backswing, but when I do, I get this cup, the face goes open, I struggle with shots to the right. I said, totally hear you. And the solution there, or the problem that he wasn't doing, is he wasn't doing the back motion enough. So if you take a club or hold your wrists up with me and just hinge the club, hold the club in front of you, hinge it straight up towards your face as much as you can. Just straight vertical hinging. And you'll notice when you do that, you're gonna have a big angle in your wrist as well. Now, if we look at any good swing model, we can pull the Adam Scott up from down the line, we know that when we get to the top of the backswing and through the early downswing, that wrist shouldn't have a big cup in it. It should in fact be pretty flat, okay? Now, how do we get it flat? We get it flat by feeling more of the back motion, okay? So Carl and I worked that. I said, listen, here's kind of what I want you to think. Think about the lead wrist. This is overly simplified, but it might help. Think about the lead wrist as the part that controls the up and down. So the left wrist goes up on the way back, it goes down on the way down, up and down. And I'm creating vertical hinge so I can do what I'm doing right now. What's that club head doing to the ground? It's hitting it, right? Okay, so if you're someone who struggles to take a divot or hit the ground, hinging the club up and then unhinging it down is the piece that creates the up and down motion. It also creates speed. If I were to swing a club with no hinge versus with hinge, there's a lot more speed there. So the hinge creates power, and it also enables you to hit the ground, right? Take a divot, hit the ball solid. Now, if the left wrist controls the up and down, then the right wrist controls the back and forth. So if you hold your right hand up in front like this and hinge the club back with your right hand, this is what we did with Carl. So get your knuckles to your forearm. See what happens there? The club goes back away from the target when I do that, yeah? Boom, boom. Now, what I'm doing is I'm combining those two. The left wrist goes up, the right wrist goes back. Left wrist goes up, right wrist goes back. So we just did a couple of those where I said, hey, hold it with your left hand, go just up, bring your right hand on and do the back motion. And what happened where I put my hands like that, if I just take that to the top of my swing, now I have that flat left wrist, and now I have everything else I want, good club face angle, etc. And that's from that right wrist bending back. So the trail wrist getting bent back is the piece that's gonna flatten your left wrist. The key or the secret is being able to fully hinge your wrists up on the way back while having the lead wrist flat. That's the secret. And in order to do that, you have to get this trail wrist extension. Now, if we pull up Adam Scott on the screen here, maybe as I'm talking or next to me, we'll have him from face on and down the line. There's timing to this stuff. Okay, like Carl and I talked about, like, hey, Eric, how do I do that? He's like, okay, that's good. That makes sense, dude. What do I do with this? Do I do it right away? Do I do it later? What do I do coming down, etc.? And here's the big picture thing we painted. Simple first, and then we'll do some details. The up motion of your wrist, I want you to think about. Your lead wrist, again, controls up or down. On the way back, it's going only up. It's going only up. I'm going up on the way back. In early transition, it stays up. And then I'm going to slowly allow that to go down. So I hinge up on the way back, I hinge down on the way down. I'm up on the way back, it stays up in transition, and then only from about hip high through the ball does that start to go down, thumbs down. Now as that left wrist is doing that, my right wrist is going back on the way back, stays back in transition, and then I'm really going to feel like it stays back through impact, but it's just slowly releasing. But the thought we created was this: get the left wrist going up as the right wrist goes back. Keep the left wrist up as the right wrist stays back. Keep the right wrist back as the left wrist goes down. Okay, let's do that again. Left wrist goes up, right wrist back on the way back. Keep the left wrist up, keep the right wrist back. This would be Adam Scott at about this point. Now I'm going to keep the right wrist bent back, but I'm going to start to unhinge the left wrist, okay? We can start to see when Adam's at about hands even with the ball, the club head's on a 45, his right wrist is still bent back, but this angle, the left wrist is starting to unhinge a little bit. It's just a big picture concept, okay? If that's too complicated for you, just think about the left wrist going up, the right wrist going back. So when we started to hit balls, that's what Carl was feeling. Okay, let me feel my left wrist up, my right wrist back. And if you do that together, the club should hinge on about a 45-degree angle like this. I wouldn't do it just like this right away in a real swing, but this is just a feel. This is what I'm feeling as my body's going back. So I can get a full hinge of the wrist, but by bending back the right wrist, that keeps the left wrist flat. So the left wrist goes up, the right wrist goes back. And that's really how I set things up during the backswing. So we talked through that. We probably hit about 20 balls. We looked at his video, right? We looked at videos on the screen. And then eventually, because anytime you're taking a lesson or you're working with us online or in person, I want you to have a drill so you have feedback. And so there's two ways to do this. There's kind of the simple man's version, which is a regular plastic hanger, or what I like better, which is the actual hanger we'll talk about in a second. I just pulled a hanger out to show them this concept. If I put a hanger on the side of my club here, and you could do this too, this gives me two different visuals. It's going to give me where the hook is. When I hinge my left wrist up, I can see where that goes relative to my forearm. So I said, Carl, get the hook on your forearm, keep it on your forearm, and then let it ride down, right? So it goes above my forearm. So get it on, keep it on, let it go up. So just to get a general idea, if I do that hinging correct, I get the hook on my arm, but also as I'm bending my right wrist back, it also keeps it pressed against my forearm. If I didn't bend my right wrist back, you see how that comes off. This is just a tool to help give him feedback, and we hit a set of shots. And part of the reason I don't like this is because it's inconvenient to hold on the side of the club. But just to give you a visual, I got the hook, said get that on my forearm and keep it on my forearm. Left wrist up, right wrist back. And we hit some shots with that, just to get a sense. And because this is inconvenient with it, eventually I pulled the hanger out, the actual hanger training aid. You guys may have seen this one before. This is the one that I like. And I set this up, if straight forward's 12 o'clock, I got this at about, between 1 and 2 o'clock. So when I set up, it's kind of just on the inside part of my trail forearm. And we pulled this out and I said, okay, when we go back, let's get that pressed against the wrist and I press that against there from bending the right wrist back gradually throughout there. And I say, hey, take this top green part and try and get that slid down to where it's just above your forearm, because that's the up part, right? If I had no hinge, that would be too high. That's the sensation we had. So left wrist up, right wrist back. Keep those, and then as you're going through impact, the right wrist stays bent back, but the left wrist is allowed to unhinge there a little bit. So we just say, hey, get the hanger on the forearm on the way back. Left wrist up, right wrist back. And what we're able to do, right, is create the checkpoints we're looking for, like that Adam Scott model. I don't want to do a ton of that right away during the takeaway. Even though we're doing that for the drill, it should be fairly passive early. And we'll see with Adam Scott. His left wrist is actually still cupped a little during the takeaway. But I'm primarily feeling the right wrist bending back and the upward hinging from the takeaway to the top. That's the primary piece in the way back. So it's not a lot early. It's from the takeaway to the top. But to keep it simple, it's just sort of a gradual motion. Left wrist up, right wrist back. And that's the piece I love about this training aid, is I have immediate feedback whether I did that enough. I want to set the hanger on my wrist and then keep it on as I start down. We'll do one more. So you can see some of those Adam Scott visuals. Not a ton early. Set it to the top, keep it. I can let that go a little bit. Left wrist up, right wrist back. Yeah, very solid. So if you're someone who does the upward motion and you're like, hey, I'm able to get the wrist hinging up, but I get a cup all the time, okay? And you came to see me in person, I would literally put this hanger on the second swing. I would put this on right away and say, okay, as you hinge up, see how when I just hinge up, the hanger does not go on my left arm. But when I bend my right wrist back, it does. So you're doing this part okay. You need to feel more of that right wrist. Get that hanger on there. Keep it on. Last one was so good, I'm gonna hit one more. Get it on, keep it on. Right wrist bent back. And that, hopefully for you like me, is gonna have you hit it really solid. So listen, I don't care what you do. You can grab one of these. This is just a plastic hanger out of my closet. Or the actual hanger, we'll put in the description down below. There's a little coupon code in there if you want to grab one of these, spend some money. This I like because you don't have to hold it every time, but get whatever you want. The point being, you need to have the upward hinge that helps you hit the ground for solid contact and create speed. But as you do that, your wrist will cup. That's going to make the club face too open and the shaft too steep. So you're going to have inconsistent contact and hit it shorter and more weak. You need to bend the right wrist back to be able to close the face and take loft off of it. How do you practice it? I'd practice it with the hanger on, as when I'm getting my vertical hinge, I'm pressing it against my wrist the whole time. We got more videos on this. In fact, we'll put a video on the side here of another, the hanger video. And when you're doing these, you're blending these two together. You're not doing it right away in the takeaway. You're doing it gradually from the takeaway to the top and in transition. And I wanted to go through all the details so that those of you who want all the detail got it. If you want the simple version, just that little end piece there. Okay, but remember, the left wrist controls the up and down, the right wrist back and forth. We'll put the hanger in the description down below. Try one of these, try a hanger from your closet. I know it's gonna help you with your game. Any questions at all, as always, leave a comment down below. I always respond to those. Appreciate you guys watching.